Alright, hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Hope you all had a wonderful week. It is Friday at the time of filming this video, and today we will be discussing how I feel and just my general thoughts on all 11 Lee Strobel books that I have read. Alright, so in no particular order, we have the 11 books I've read by Lee Strobel, and this is just going from top to bottom. So first up is The Case for Christmas. This shorter book in his stuff that he's written. It is just a brief synopsis of a simple case for Christmas and Jesus' birth, and just quickly goes over it. And after about every chapter, there's, if you want more information on this type of thing, on this part of the case for Christmas, he pretty much puts a book that'll pretty much alleviate towards this, and probably a chapter of that book as well. This is a good, fun read that I read beginning of last year, right after Christmas. It was good. It was fun. It was nice. All right, next up in this list is The Case for Easter. I also read this last year. I read it around roughly Easter time last year to kind of just read it around the time of year that it is about. It's just like a case for Christmas. It's a short and brief thing over Jesus's death and Jesus's death, journey to the cross, and like resurrection and stuff. And it has tidbits towards the end about, if you want more information about this part or this part about this particular theological theory or philosophical thing, read this book. It's connected to this. All right, so now we have The Case for Hope. This is also one of the shorter ones. Um, it isn't like Case for Easter or Christmas. This is the book. It's not like Case for Easter or Christmas, but it is one of the smaller books of Lee Strobel in size. It's about the normal length for a typical Lee Strobel book. However, this doesn't include his normal like interview process that he normally does. It's just a typical breakdown of like a case for hope and explaining it in a more deeper way. All right, and so now we have the fourth book in the of the 11, and so this is by Lee Strobel, Inside the Mind of Unchurched Harry and Mary: How to Reach Friends and Family Who Avoid God and the Church. So this is specifically for a book about trying to disciple or reach someone that isn't a believer or who is very distant from being a believer and probably has like church hurt to some degree, or has like church hurt or has like misgivings about God and the church. And so this is kind of like a guide point of how to do that. He does delve into his own personal experience with that, as well as he was basically unchurched Harry and before he became Christian. All right, so now the pretty much the rest of this list, except for two of the later ones, are very theological based and very heavy and dense in the way that they are. Maybe Case for Christ and Case for Faith aren't as such, but most of the rest of this list is a very much denser than the first couple. And I say that because the Case for a Creator, the pretty much, I think I would say, one of the thicker books or like longer books of them all, as Lee Strobel used his journalistic investigation techniques to delve into how to prove that there is a God through scientific evidence, because a lot of people love to use science as a way to disprove God. So he uses that specifically to prove God, as he interviews a few theological or even some non believers as well to help to prove his points. All right, and so this is the halfway point of the whole thing, book number 6. Again, in no particular order, but if you were to ever read or begin to read Lee Strobel, this is definitely the book to start, as this is his own personal journey towards becoming a believer in faith in Christ. So this is the case for Christ. There's also a movie on this, I think. I haven't watched it. But this is going into his entire faith journey from step one all the way to becoming a believer and now him after being a believer. And so this is pretty much the book that started all of these books of him becoming a very prolific Christian author and writing all these wonderful books and his wonderful, wonderful journey along the way to see how it all came to be. All right, so now as we reach into the second half of these 11 books, if you're enjoying this video and you've gotten this far, like the video to spread it out and show your appreciation for it. Subscribe for future videos. Every single Saturday, there is a book review or some type of book content. This one is about Lee Strobel books I've read. The next Saturday book video will be on all the C.S. Lewis books I've read. And so this next one is The Case for Faith, which I believe is pretty much his second Christian book that he did after, and the first one immediately after The Case for Christ. And so this brings up the toughest objections to Christianity and a lot of viewpoints on why you should have faith even in this tough world that we live in. All right, so the next book on this list is a little bit of a different one. It's not among the Case for series, but it's still a book that is very similar to the type of books that Lee Strobel writes, which is God's Outrageous Claims. These are 13 discoveries that can like transform your life, and they're like outrageous as a good title for the book, but it's also like normal claims of God from the scripture, but to some may seem like outrageous or out of the norm claims to make towards people. And so that's pretty much what the whole book is. It's just 13 claims throughout the whole book, and like rules and laws and policies for us to follow under being Christians and followers of God and Christ. So now, as we go into the final 3 books of these 11 books that I've read within the past 2 to 3 years by Lee Strobel, we now go into one where it's kind of like a deeper dive into Jesus. From, you've probably read at this point, The Case for Christ and like A Case for Faith. And so this is pretty much on par with how dense and philosophical and theological based that The Case for a Creator is. And so this is in defense of Jesus, proving the identity of Jesus and going after the investigative attacks on the identity of Jesus. And so these are 6 challenges that Lee Strobel goes through to challenge and as he aims to prove the actual identity of Jesus Christ. And so this is in defense of Jesus. And so this is a deeper dive into Jesus Christ by Lee Strobel. All right, and so among our final 2 are the only hardcover books that I have of Lee Strobel. I prefer paperback, but it all depends on the pricing of each book. But this is The Case for Miracles, which is his journalistic investigation and evidence into the supernatural and miracles, and that they did happen during Jesus' time and during the apostles' time in Acts of the Apostles and during the letters that mostly Paul wrote, but also that they are continuing to happen still, even in our modern day and era, just they're not as frequent or big news topics as whenever Jesus and his apostles were around. And so this book goes into 5 different parts, which is it does the case for, it does the case against, and the case for miracles. And then we go into more deeper stuff after that. We have science, dreams, and visions. Then we have the most spectacular miracles, whether by Jesus or outside of Jesus as well. Then we have difficulties with miracles. And so each part of this has one or more interviews, where the first 2 parts have just one interview each, whereas the rest have individual interviews for each chapter within the part, as we get a deep dive into the supernatural and into Jesus' miracles and the miracles that have happened since and even recently in the modern day. Okay, so now we've reached the final book. And so, if you've liked this video, please like it to get it out there and show your appreciation for it. Every like and every view counts and makes a difference. So, and also, if you like my content, my channel, please subscribe. Become one of the first 20, because we're now at 10 subscribers. So let's get the subscribers up and hope you can join us along the journey. Comment below if you've read any of these books, or any thoughts on Lee Strobel or any of his works, or any other Christian books you've read. So the last book is The Case for Heaven. And so this, of course, is a journalistic investigation for evidence for life after death, for that heaven does exist. And so there's 10 chapters with 10 different topics, with roughly 10 interviews, or somewhere around 10 interviews, like an interview per topic and per chapter, to break down all these things about heaven and to further prove that heaven does exist, and all the different reasonings, theological and philosophical, through books, the Bible, and historical references as well. And so that is the case for heaven, as he goes across the country to interview people like he does for most of his books. All right, and so those are the 11 books that I've read by Lee Strobel, and I think I pretty much have read most of his major works in, like, the Case for series, Christ, Christmas, Creator, Easter, Faith, Hope, Miracles, God's Outrageous Claims, Defense of Jesus, and Heaven. There's a few other ones with a few different authors, but these are pretty much most of the heavy hitters and main books that Lee Strobel has written. And so there could be a few others here and there to read, but mostly I have read most of Lee Strobel's books. So this has been a deep dive into, and just a brief description on each of these 11 books, of which I've enjoyed reading over the past 2-3 years or so. And now I'm delving into other Christian books right now. I am still reading Finding Jesus in the Old Testament. I'm getting closer towards the end of it. We're now in the point where we're breaking down Finding Jesus through Leviticus and Deuteronomy as the next chapter. I am officially halfway through the Fellowship of the Ring. Once I finish the Fellowship of the Ring in Lord of the Rings, I will take a break to read Project Hail Mary, as the movie based off the book will be coming out on March 20th, which is, by the time this video is out, which will be less than 2 weeks away. And so that and much, much more, be subscribed and come along with the journey. We are now past the MCU Infinity Saga, so I'll be talking about why the DC Extended Universe failed with its structure, its movies, its management, and stuff like that. That'll be Monday's video, and Tuesday we'll start doing a few compilation videos on the Infinity Saga. See you next time. Goodbye.